said, I'm never going to the military. And he came by and he started talking. I started listening. I'm like, wow, I had absolutely no idea it was like this. I was headed off to college. So I said, I'll just wait until I get to college to join. Is there for a reason. So when you get out to the fleet, you'll know and understand the importance of things that you do or don't do in wartime can mean the difference of somebody coming home and not. At a very early stage in my career, boot camp, they taught that it's imperative that we get that concept. I learned quick. I mean, it was a challenge, no doubt. 13 weeks of misery and 13 weeks of another word. But you look back, you think, well, was it as hard as I thought it was? But we learned pretty much a lot of the guys in our unit.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Career Education Learning Center podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Rivers. Did you know that May is Military Appreciation Month? I didn't either. But we're going to observe Military Appreciation Month this day and throughout the month of May and June. Today, we have Windell Fant. Windell is a retired Marine Reservist and is currently an educator helping our young people become future leaders of America. How are you doing today, Windell?
I'm doing amazing. I appreciate you having me on here. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, man. I can't help it. And full disclaimer, I've been knowing Windell for a long time. How long has it been, Windell? About 15 years at least?
It's been about 15 years.
Yeah, man.
Exactly.
We're both getting older.
I know we are. Yeah. We're getting wiser.
Well, I love that. We're getting seasoned and wiser. You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah. We're getting seasoned and wiser.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Windell, why did you go in the Marines when you came out of high school rather than any other branch of service?
Well, I actually, when I got out of high school, I went to college, but there was a recruiter that came by, and one thing I said, never say never. Said I'm never going to the military. And he came by and he started talking. I started listening. I'm like, wow, I had absolutely no idea it was like this. And so I was headed off to college. So I said, I'll just wait until I get to college to join. And, I can do both. And I got there, I ran track in college, and a lot of the guys that were on the track team were in the Marine Corps.
Wow.
And my one of my best friends, he said, man, let's join the Marine Corps. Those guys are in it. I said, well, I was thinking about it anyway. So yeah, let's do it. I was going to join the National Guard, but, they were all in the Marine Corps. Then we had career day, and I saw that uniform. I said, "That's the one. That is it." And so I went that summer. That after that first year of college, I went in between semesters, so I could still stay in college and still be a part of the military. And it was a great move.
Well, when consequently, I get the same thing too, except I didn't see there was no Army uniform that influenced me to join the Army. What influenced me to join the Army was my mother, who said, look, we don't have so much money for college, so they offer a lot of education assistance for that. I think you need to go like your other two brothers did. And so my decision was made by my mother more than it was by our uniform.
Yeah.
And so
your mother knows best, right?
Did you do the same setup I had? Because I think I went to college. So after high school, I went to basic training that summer. Then I came back and did my reserve duties on the weekends. And then the next summer, I did my MOS, or I went to where I went to do my school. Is that the same thing that you did?
Same thing. Yes. Yep. Same deal.
Now, one thing I want to know, and I talked to some Marines when I was going into the MEP station. That's where they process you at. And I knew good and well that as bad as I may have had in my basic training, I knew at Parris Island, at Parris Island, South Carolina, it was going to be bad for Marines. How was that transition?
Well, I learned quick. I mean, it was a challenge, no doubt. 13 weeks of misery and 13 weeks of, another word. But but you look back, you think, well, was it as hard as as I thought it was? But we learned pretty much a lot of the guys in our unit. We learned to do it as fast as you can. There were some days you just weren't going to win, and you just do it the best that you can, and you just compete and you work hard. There's a physical aspect of it. Because I ran track, I was pretty much in shape. So the physical part didn't hurt. But that mental part and those hot days, I went in the summer, sand fleas, they were real, right? And so the biggest challenge was the mental part of knowing and looking back and seeing all the things that you were doing and didn't think that you could do. And, you look back and, they build your confidence up to do a lot of amazing things that you didn't think that you could do before. But the experience was great. Do I want to do it again? Absolutely not. One time was enough. One time was certainly enough. And I met some good friends throughout that. So it was overall a great experience, but tough. Absolutely, very tough.
So I know from my training in the military, I really learned about teamwork and the importance of teamwork. And that was very important to me that I had to learn. And I played sports like you did. And I thought I knew about teamwork, but I didn't know how important teamwork was during basic training. How important was teamwork when you went to basic training?
Oh, yeah, it was necessary. You work together as a unit. You work together in small units. So you depended on everybody else. And, that training, is there for a reason. So when you get out to the fleet, you'll know and understand the importance of, the things that you do or don't do in wartime could mean the difference of somebody coming home and not, So at a very early stage in my career, boot camp, they taught that is, it's imperative that we get that concept and understand that concept. Like it was the back of our hand. So there was no question about should we or are we, good teammates. You just make it work.
You just make it work. Mm-hmm. And so when you went to that next summer, as I did, what was your MOS and what duty station did you go to learn your occupational job?
Yeah, so I was a combat engineer and I went to Camp Lejeune and I was there, gosh, was it 8 weeks, maybe something like that. That was good. You got a little bit more freedom, of course, you're training and you're learning all day. So, you got your evenings. Those evenings were spent a lot of time studying and learning the information, but we had a good time too, so, want to burn off the steam. Yeah. But, it was a little bit more relaxed, environment because, again, you're not in training mode for boot camp anymore. So you're in learning mode. And, they actually, I think this is even better today than we had it, but, they had actually everything that you needed right there in that area. Courthouse Bay. They had a Courthouse Bay, man. Yeah. Hey, that's when I discovered a working party. I'm like, well, what is that? Well, working party is you go to work and there's a group of y'all and they call it a party, and we had to do this. I know it felt like 10 miles, probably wasn't that far, but, but waiting for the class to get started, picking up paper on side the, on side the road, just doing busy stuff, man. That's why I hate seeing paper on the road today. Because it was back then doing that. Yeah.
Well, Wendell, when I was in the military and I went to Army school, and a lot of my orders may or may not know that I went to a quartermaster school at Fort Lee, Virginia. And because we went early in the morning for class like you did, that afternoon we ran every day at 4:00. Now, if you think I'm a high yellow brother now, you should see me before then. Yeah. The color pigmentation I have now was because of that. Every day at 4:00, man, we ran that base. And fortunately, I was an athlete, but man, I got tired. 4:00 and it is hot. I'm still down south now. I'm not bad as you are in South Carolina, but it was pretty bad there, and it was pretty bad. So when you reported to your duty station, what reserve unit was you a part of?
I was part of Charlie Company in Charleston, South Carolina, LSB, Landing Support Battalion. And so, anybody tell you the red patches, right? So that's how we had a red patch on our uniform. We were really the only ones that had something, a color like that on our uniform in the whole Marine Corps. So,
Wow.
the only ones. And what we did was, we set up base, when they come from, Marines come from ship to shore.
Right.
We set up that base and, clear the beach, and do those type things and, and bring in supplies that way. We do helicopter support teams, which, if you've seen a helicopter and it would, pick up like maybe a water bull or one of the vehicles, and carry it to a location. So we were the ones that were connecting those things to the helicopter so it could move from place to place. We did that, training over and over and over, because as a reservist, you doing it, 1 weekend out of the month and then 2 weeks out of the summer. And so when you get there, that's pretty much all you're doing is training, because you need to be ready if they call it if the balloon goes up. You need to be ready. You need to be proficient, and we worked hard, at it, and took it serious. At least I did, at least I did. Yeah. I took it serious. It was, for me, a great honor. And let me go back a little bit. I don't think I told you why the full reason why I joined. And I know it sounds kind of cliche, but there was a lot of people that sacrificed just so that, you're not gonna be on this podcast, so that we could, live in the community that we live and go to the schools that we went to and, just have this thing called freedom, which isn't free. But, I said it's a great way to, give back. That was one of the reasons. Other reason was, the older guys were doing it. My brother's in the military. He went to the Army, but, that uniform looked good. But at the same time, it was a way for me to honor, those that have fallen and given the ultimate sacrifice, so that we can enjoy these liberties, that we have today.
Yeah, and that's like being prior military, and I have military members throughout my family. My two older brothers also went to reserve, and but my oldest brother, he ended up when he went to school, he went to ROTC, and so he got an ROTC scholarship, and then he went to officers training school, and so me and him both ended up in Desert Shield, Desert Storm in 1991.
Yeah,
and so you're right about that preparation, because we had to prepare what we've been doing for reservists, the whole kind of weekends and 2 weeks out of the year. And I didn't think it was going to come to fruition, Wendell. I was on the old films where they said, well, I just joined for the college education.
Yeah,
that was me. I didn't join ready to go to war, but I did. I am glad I took it serious like you did. My unit took it serious. We learned that teamwork you talk about doing basic training. We learned the skills that we need to have during school or MOS school, and it really came in handy. Did you go overseas or did you serve in the war?
I did. So in fact, my last semester in college, they felt it was necessary that I go. I followed up and Desert Shield, Desert Storm, went over there my last semester. That experience, I mean, young kid, 20 years old, and going to experience war, I'll admit it, it was pretty scary, because didn't have any idea of what to expect, and I'm supposed to be graduating in a few months, and they had other plans for me. So I was able to come back and finish that year, and then more recently, Iraqi Freedom, got called up for that as well. So 2 tours. I did 2 tours there.
Well, I may say this many times throughout the podcast, but thank you for your service, man. I mean, I served 1 tour and I got out. And ironically, ladies and gentlemen, I also got caught up my last semester, except I was more fortunate than Wendell. I didn't have to go back. So it was actually my last semester, because I had to go that fall to finish get my degree. And the head of chairman of the administration department at UNC Pembroke said, if you get through at least halfway, then I'll tell them go ahead and give you your grade, because you're serving our country. and I'm one that don't like final exams. So that was a good part. About missing final exams, I was happy.
Right. Yeah, that was a good trade-off.
Those final exams, I'm very happy.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's in our very spirit, and I was very mad. I don't know how mad you were. I was mad, and I was probably mad at God more than anybody because I was saying, and it was a scary time, ladies and gentlemen, going to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, because of the threat of nuclear weapons and him using chemical attacks. Saddam Hussein using chemical attacks. We had to prepare for that, and so I said, why did I go to school for 4 years only to come back and not use my degree? But I think we was blessed, and I say this all the time to veterans, to Vietnam veterans, that unfortunately, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't probably be here today, because they knew during that time when they could not have another Vietnam. We had to go in full strap. We had to go in there seriously, and we did decisively, and they took their time, and we was blessed to come out victorious. Me and you both were blessed to come back home and, if everything and everything in hand there. So that is definitely something I wanted to do, and I was blessed to do it. So why did you ever go regular Marine? Did you ever think about going regular Marine, as I told you earlier?
I did, and it's great. I guess I was maybe a homebody, maybe, and and so some of the older guys, these were, I would have gone in as an officer after college, and 2 officers were telling me, they said, well, yeah, it's going to be a great opportunity. First place you're going to go is Japan. I'm like, man, I'm not going to Japan. Hey, look, I ain't leaving my mama. I ain't going that far away from my mama. So, and that was the reason why I, did not go active right after college. I had a desire to be a pilot, and just other things popped up, and I wasn't going that far away. So I stayed reserves. Which I had an amazing tour. Career in the reserves, and enjoyed every bit of it. So I guess God makes no mistakes, and he knew what was best for me, and that's the road that I took.
Okay, Wendell, why did you choose to go into education rather than other fields I'm pretty sure that you qualify for?
Yeah, I was actually in corporate America, had some great opportunities that was presented. And as a congressional staffer, did that as well, and as a Congress, they only got 2 years, so then you got to start the whole process over, so I did that for a few years, and then corporate America, so went back to corporate America after that, and I just didn't feel like my work meant anything, and I believe in my nature that's who I was designed to be. In corporate America, it can be cutthroat, and people steadily stabbing you in the back, and that just wasn't me. So I wanted my work to mean something, and the place that I felt that could do that, that could offer me that opportunity to make my work feel like something, was education. So I got the opportunity to go teach at a high school, Concord High, and I'm gonna tell you, man, I wished I would have pursued that earlier in my career, because it's amazing, especially when you get those kids that have no direction, and they just kind of giving teachers a hard time, everybody a hard time, but when it clicks. And it clicks, they get it, and it just makes you feel good that that you had a part, in shaping these young lives, and molding them to be something that they never thought that they may have could have achieved or done. They hated my class, but they would come back, and tell me how much they appreciated, which to me was bigger than a check.
Right, I understand it. Yes. And that's what I said earlier, that he is shaping our young people to become future leaders. You see why I said that, ladies and gentlemen? Because he really is. He really is. Now, absolutely. You skipped over real fast to do the congressional staffer. I didn't let that go. I'm old, but not that old. How was that experience? And did that experience have translate to what when you became an educator, knowing all the experience that you had?
So that was an amazing experience, So as a Congress, Congress has a district. And so, we really work with people within that district. Sometimes it crossed over into other districts, but,
Mm-hmm.
the congressman that I worked for, he said, we don't want to ever tell anybody no. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to figure it out before we tell them that we can't do it. So it was another opportunity, to help people who didn't feel like they didn't have any other choice or hope. Helped a lot of veterans with with their disability claims. Helped a lot of constituents, navigate through some red tape. But that was an amazing experience, and you get to help a variety of people, and it felt good. So I got that opportunity. I was actually running for county commissioner at that time.
Oh man.
And me and the congressman would continuously, run into each other.
Uh-huh.
And unfortunately, I didn't win, but he did ask me after it was all over. He said, I appreciate the hard work that you put in, to serving and all, and would you like to come work for me? And I said, I certainly would. I think I'll take that opportunity. And it was a great opportunity. It was an amazing opportunity to work in that capacity.
And so that's great, because I think what I'm hearing you about is what happened as a great educator is that your experience in the military, your experience being a staffer, your experience in the corporate America, that all that you wrap into one when you talk to class. Is that correct?
It's absolutely correct, man. I bring in, leaning from all of those experiences and share with them, what real world is going to be like, and I let them know that, I'm not perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes, probably made more mistakes than all of them put together.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to know, one, that teachers are real, and we make mistakes and we're human, and, we've got families, and, so to bring that humanity piece to it, and then just, again, having those experiences, bringing them into the classroom to let them know that, hey, these are some of the things that you'll face out in the real world.
Being an educator and being in the military, do you think our young people are prepared to go either into the military or the college? I know it's changed a lot, but you think that are we preparing them as a society for our young people to succeed in life?
Mitchell, let's pray right now. Let's pray right now. We've got some that are really prepared, really focused and dialed in and know exactly what they want to do. Then we have some that have no idea, what they want to do, what they are even interested in. So those are the ones that, I guess on both sides, the ones that know what they want to do, you just kind of guide them and make sure that they, have everything they need to succeed. And the ones that don't, you present as many opportunities as you can to see what, lack of a better term, sticks, but to see if you can find some interest. And so, I was at the high school, now I'm at a middle school. So right now I'm planting seeds as a career development coordinator. It's planting those seeds, of some things that they may not have considered before. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest challenges I see with students is that conversation piece, and I know everybody wants to blame COVID. I'm not going to blame COVID because, even though it seems as though the world stopped, but one thing that we have to always learn how to do, which is adjust and prepare and be ready for change. And for whatever reason, those individuals that, in high school and middle school and high school now, they experience that. But at the same time, you still have to learn some skills. You have to learn how to, to manage your emotions. You have to learn how to have a conversation, a legitimate conversation. Some of the things that I see each and every day is, they're not willing to hold themselves accountable, but, they want to hold individuals' statuses or standards up here when, unfortunately theirs is down here. And my goal is to, is to bridge that gap where they understand that, you have to learn, if you do what you did in corporate America, they're going to give you this thing called a pink slip, and they will show you the door. So that's why I like the job that I have now is because I can help shape that, right? And as I see that, you develop those relationships and you start feeding them something different, showing them something different. Because now, I don't know the exact percentage, but I know it's high. I know it's probably well over 50% that, they get called out for something in class. And the first thing they say is, I didn't do anything. I'm like, come on now, right?
Yeah.
One kid told me he got sent out the room for singing silently. So I'm sure you did get sent out for singing silently. It's that ownership piece, man. If they get that and learn how to have a conversation, that right now, if they took their career, their school as as serious as they do that cell phone, man, it'll be amazing. It'll be amazing.
Yeah, to be fair, Wendell, that unfortunately that's our society, right? That is our society. Is that it's a totally different time before we grew up, where you had to take accountability whether you want to or not. You know what I'm saying? And if you didn't take accountability, the teacher and the parent would both take accountability for you.
Oh yeah,
and make sure you had accountability.
Yeah.
So it is different in different world. And I'm pretty sure our parents and grandparents said the same thing about us when we were younger too. It is a different world, especially with the technology piece, right? The streaming service, the chat GBT, the AI and everything else is coming aboard. It really is a different world. And so hopefully teachers like yourself and coordinators and people within our education system, are continue to pour into our young people. And that's why I had this platform, Wendell, is to pull the young people and just give them options and things to think about. And so that's why I had this platform. So before we leave, is there any advice or suggestions that you have for our young people that may either want to go to the military or go to college?
Yeah. Well, how much more time we got, right? So
only a few minutes, unfortunately, but cut it short, man. Cut it short.
Yeah. I give you the quick version. So the one thing that I would say is just work to be 1% better, right? Because all the other kids are so content with being average and ordinary, just being 1% better each and every day, right? At the end of the year, to be 37.8% better, that's how far ahead you will be along, ahead of your peers. So, work to be that, right? And don't follow that crowd, because when you follow the crowd, it's just like when you driving on the road, his car get off, there's a detour, you just follow the car ahead of you, because, you think they know where they're going, right? And that could actually be their exit. You just follow them home or whatever. So you got to have a path, right? And I get at the middle school age, who knows what they want to do. High schools don't know, some adults
adjusting to your hormones and everything, right?
Yeah. So those will be the things. And as it relates to college, workforce, or military, I want them to be the best that they can be at whatever they choose to. Just know that the options that are out there, everybody may not be college material or even want to go to college. I know a lot of kids are opting out of college and going to the workforce. The one thing that we shouldn't forget is the trade schools, right?
Right.
You go and you learn a trade, and you come out and be extremely productive. Don't forget about certifications. We've got our securities license, SIE 663. I'm working on that 65. So those are some certifications that can pay you a lot of money as well. And if it's the military, know that this is not the military of the old, where they thought that was your if you didn't have nothing else to do, you go to the military.
All right.
The military has a lot to offer now. You get to travel the world, you get to meet a lot of interesting people, a lot of people not from your community, meaning maybe your state. You're meeting people from all over.
Right.
So it's a great opportunity, and you get to travel all over, right? So that's certainly a benefit now. And then if you choose to go to college, know that it's not where you start, it's where you finish, which is the finish line is the end. And you don't have to go to a top tier school to be a top tier producer in whatever it is that you choose to do. Just know that there are many paths to get to that end. And where you choose to go or choose to study and what you choose to study, it's really going to be on you whether you find success or not, because all college does is teach you how to live 4 years with no money.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
You are right about that. There was no NIL deals back in our day.
Yeah, with no NIL deals. Right. No NIL deals.
So you really had to work hard there. Wendell,
Yes.
thank you so much, man. Hey, those seeds that you sold into our young people and even people who want to change careers, hey, I really appreciate it. I appreciate your service to our country, and I appreciate what you're doing for our young people today. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Mitchell. I appreciate you having me here and giving me a chance to share. Thank you for your service as well. And let's keep pressing, man, because we got some work to do with those young folks. But I believe ultimately we're in good hands.
I can say it better. I cannot have said it better. And I'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining me, Mitchell Rivers, on another terrific episode of the Career Education Learners in the Podcast, where we're making your career dreams a reality. God bless.